I'm author Mark Muncy,
And I'm author Erika Lance.
and this is Eerie Travels. Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. It's Friday the 13th
of October. Yeah, spooky season at its peak.
At its peak. I'm super excited. I'm
I-
super excited because we are basically very close to the middle of the most epic month of the year, which is Halloween season.
Yes.
Which me and you both agree that Halloween should extend all the way to Christmas. Not gonna lie though, I
It's
was
all
in a
year.
Walmart and they've already got Christmas stuff out.
They
And
had the
it's not
Christmas
even
stuff out in early October. It was
yeah, no, that's nuts. It's so crazy. So we are on Friday the 13th. We have a very special episode
Yes.
that transports us in time, but it's
A
special
couple
for
times.
yes, a couple times, and it's special for another reason because our mountain layers were invaded again
Yes, we had a special guest.
because she showed up and we couldn't do anything about it. So
Yes,
welcome back, Valerie Willis.
woo!
it is I. I am back.
Yes.
The queen of the Ruger.
Yeah, we had a little bit of homework for you
Yeah.
for this one because we all wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about.
We all wanted to talk.
Well,
this is a Mark's
This
pet
is a Mark
project.
thing because I want to talk about one very specific thing that happened with one of my favorite books that later became one of my favorite movies, but it all boils back to one of my favorite entertainment experiences of all time, and you got to listen to that on the drive up.
Yes. Now, before you comment on it, I just want to point out, listeners, we have gotten a lot of feedback on Dogman. We are going to have an episode on that. So I
Yep.
just want to throw that out there because
There have been a rash of sightings, and we're getting a lot of emails. We will be doing a Dogman episode coming soon.
we are not ignoring you, but Mark paraded through our what movies to watch episode with his number one being
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. So where are we teleporting back to
We're going to
start?
go back before the movie,
Oh,
but after the book. We're not going all the way back to the book.
when did the book come out? Do we know?
Book was 1890.
18.
It came out 1898
Okay.
In the
Yeah.
US.
in
But
in the UK.
in the UK.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was written between 1895 and 1897,
That's what it is.
but by the great H.G. Wells.
Yeah, so and I don't care about any of that. So continue on with the story.
Well, then why did you ask it?
Because I figured listeners would want to know what we're
Okay.
talking about.
But we're talking about a few years later, 1938.
Yep.
Another man named Wells, but the late great Orson Welles
Orson Welles.
had decided to do a radio dramatization for Halloween for his Mercury Theater on the Air of the novel.
And we need to take everybody back to a time when there was not really television sets.
No,
There were motion pictures, but there were not television sets. And what people
Yeah.
tended to do was gather around their radios because people
it was
did
entertainment.
dramatizations, and that's how you got the news and things like
Yeah.
that. And
And
that was the method to learn things. So he decides to do this, but there was a twist to doing this, wasn't there?
he decided to update it. They had already done this. They did it with Dracula some years before. And they decided, well, let's update War of the Worlds. And they came up with a few ideas to do it like a news broadcast of just interrupting regularly scheduled program and all this to make it very dramatic and very compelling. And there was an uproar when Dracula a few years prior, another radio station had done it, another radio company. So he's like, ooh, I'd like that kind of response, because to be fair, Mercury Theater Radio was not doing well.
No.
It was the lowest rated show because it was up against the king of the time slot. Remember, this isn't streaming. You had to flip channels to try to find things, and this is on radio. But the king of the time was the Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Bergen hour. So the wonderful puppet.
Yep.
So the best ventriloquist ever on radio. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Was
It
the
was
most popular show on the radio. So
Probably a lot easier to perform as a ventriloquist when there is not a camera on
And,
you.
and to put this into perspective, this is like that age before Netflix and stuff took off.
Oh,
where
this is
everyone's competing. with
Netflix, there
1 hour
wasn't.
shows.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say this.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
isn't
No,
streaming.
but
No, this is-
the broadcast that one.
you had
You got
three
an
or
hour
four-
slot.
you had
to-
3 or
to
4
do your
radio
thing.
stations too. This was not,
Yeah.
not like now where there's a country station. But you had 3 or 4 radio stations: ABC, CBS, NBC. So this was Mercury Theater, and they were doing their show. And now what happened is Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Bergen show starts at the same time Orson Welles is doing his introduction, and he's doing his no one would have believed in the early years of the 20th century that human affairs are being watched from the timeless worlds of space. That amazing speech that is just incredible. I still get goosebumps.
And you
Yeah.
can find this on YouTube, travelers. So
Or any
Spotify.
Spotify and stuff, you can find Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. But
Yep.
it starts off, he does that intro, but then
it goes to, and he's like, at this point, the Crosby Services, which was CBS, estimated that there were 1 million people listening in on the radio. And then it cuts to pretending to be a broadcast. Now, 99% of the radio listeners in America are listening to Charlie McCarthy and doing jokes and things like this. So about the 5 or 10 minute mark in,
People start surfing.
what happens is Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Bergen bring in a singer who is known for singing a few big songs, but they have him sing kind of a controversial number. And now this is the 1930s, and we are just pre World War II, and this person's singing a song in German. And we're already not really liking the Germans because of the stuff they're doing overseas. So what would you do if something's coming on the radio you don't like?
you find another station.
You find another station. And when you turn your station, suddenly you're hearing about a strange incident in Grover's Mills, New Jersey.
And on top of it, what I noticed is, okay, first off, when he starts the very beginning, because you get to listen to all of it in its recording, he's very quick with that intro before he starts that monologue. He's like, "Oh, we're doing a dramatization of this, like less than 20 seconds long."
The announcer.
Which is weird because they used to make a big deal, like a good
And it was
5
starring
minutes.
such and such.
Starring
Yeah.
so and so, right? And they would normally list actors and try to build it up. He didn't do that for this one.
No.
And so when people were surfing around that 10 minute mark, they would land on and they used popular songs for
Yes.
that
So,
time frame.
right then,
So
you're
if
hearing
someone's
that beautiful
listening to
song.
music and then it's interrupted. Something has crashed at a farm out of,
Grover's Mill, New
Grover's Mill,
Jersey.
New Jersey.
And now this was the New York station that was broadcasting this. So it's, we'll get into the making of this later for the second half after the break. But what's incredible at this point is now suddenly their audience has tripled and they don't know this. They're broadcasting live. This is going out on the air. And they have no idea. And one of the fun things that goes on right then is this is like the first example of something going viral because word starts spreading. Everybody's like, "Have you heard what's on the radio? Have you heard what's on the radio?" And they start telling their friends and other family. And this is the early days of the phone.
Yeah.
So everybody starts getting on the switchboard, calling their aunt, saying something weird in New Jersey, or "You're up there. Are you okay?" And so all the folks in New Jersey start getting these phone calls, these families that haven't talked to their other family members in ages. And already everybody's kind of paranoid anyway, because weird stuff's going down in Europe and we don't understand it.
Yeah.
So.
And the other strange thing that I noted that they did in it is that within their dramatization, they're acknowledging the interrupted news broadcast that they faked just moments before.
Yeah.
Like they start interviewing the farmer of Grover's Mill, and he's like, "Yeah, I was watching that news break,
Yeah.
about the scientists and him seeing the thing on Mars." And next thing I know, something's crashing in my,
I was
bar.
just about to sleep. I was listening to the
It
radio
knocked me
and
out of my chair.
yeah, it's so great. The characters in this are so well written and so modern updates of characters from the book.
Yep.
And they could have done book translation, something like that. No, he went this route
All
and
out.
it's immediate and it pulls you in. And even listening to it today. it
Yeah,
pulls you in.
and I think the big thing that we haven't said, but we kind of said, is that people thought this was real. People
It's-
thought, and that's where this
This
came
is where
into
it's
play.
building.
Yes,
Yeah.
because it created a massive panic as it starts to
A
roll.
little overblown from what we've been told historically, but yes, it does create a panic. And people start calling.
Yeah,
As people start calling their local stations. Now they start calling the main station in New York because that's where all these little switchboard ladies are going, well, nobody's at the local station. Let's send you to the New York switchboard. So I guess I was going to talk about this after the break, but we'll talk about it now. What had happened that day, CBS had put all of their ladies in the answering pool, the switchboard operators, through training to be nicer to people calling them. They had just done this. And so the supervisor was watching them because this was their first primetime night after they'd been told all this. And
was there a problem with them before?
apparently they were just not being nice enough. And CBS was really wanting to promote this era of positivity and all this stuff. And what's funny is this one lady answers the phone and she says, well, I'm sorry, I don't have that information available. Please call back another time. And the guy went, that's perfect. That's what we want. Don't just hang up on him. What did she want? She said, well, the caller wanted to know if it was the end of the world.
Okay, I shouldn't be laughing because I bet that caller was losing their effing
Well,
mind.
yes.
The other thing I noted, because these guys had a particular pattern that they followed. Like I said, the intro was so stripped that I had to pause it and I replayed it for a second.
Yep.
The other thing that threw me is intermission doesn't happen until 40 minutes out of the 60-minute program.
Yeah, which is nuts. Yeah, and it's one of those. There's a bit like right about this time when they've got the audience now. The audience is building, and that is when they're at the aliens have landed. The object has landed in Grover's Mill. The men are approaching the object, and Carl Phillips, the newscaster, is trying to get a little closer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to get closer. There's some men approaching it. There seems to be movement inside, the capsule, or and all this. And he's like, the men are approaching now. They're holding a white flag. Hopefully the things inside understand what that is, and and he's already described them from the novel. The quivering lipless mouth. That's right from H.G. Wells's novel. So if you've read the novel, it didn't stand out because the larger than a bear and held down by Earth's gravity and all this. But then he's like, we're holding up a white flag. Hopefully those creatures understand what that means. And then you hear the sound effect of the heat ray heating up. And then it hits, and then you hear the screams.
And then radio silence.
And then Carl Phillips is like, ladies and gentlemen, it's 100 yards from our end. And then dead silence.
Which was well done. And it lingers.
Never done on radio. You don't broadcast dead air. It's just, especially back then, because what's going to happen? People are going to change channels. But Wells held that for almost 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Of dead silence.
And then they're like, we're just going to go back to the music.
And then the music starts again.
And you're like,
we're having some technical difficulties with our crew at Grover's Mill. And that's right when the phone calls start, because that's the panic, right? What the hell is going on? And then it cuts back, and then suddenly we get the state announcement that there's a state of emergency being declared in Grover's Mills. Martial law has been declared in Princeton, and all this other stuff. craziness, right? Can you
It's
imagine them doing that now?
Well, I think, the difference is back then, and this is where we and travelers, as you're listening to, absolutely, you should listen to this. Recommended 10 out of 10. And one of the things that I remember that caught me the first time I heard it was imagining sitting in your farmhouse or sitting around your living room radio, because that's what they had back then.
No,
Somewhat
internet.
staticky, the little bit of static going in the background. You're used to hearing music or happy people talking. There were dramas, but they weren't like dramas as we know it. If we went and showed somebody a dramatic movie from nowadays, like No Country for Old Men, and went and showed it to people in 1938, they'd lose their effing minds. They wouldn't understand.
We love listening to old radio shows. Like my favorite was yours truly, Johnny Dollar, the man with the exciting expense account. And it's the joke. He's an insurance investigator. And so every crime that he investigates, these fraud crimes and stuff are, item one, 38 cents, cup of coffee at Ma's. And then, and it's literally, he's itemizing his crime investigation. It's amazing. And they would broadcast 10, 15-minute episodes 5 nights a week. And then you'd get the big half-hour episode.
Half an hour on the last day. Drink some water before you joke on air.
Yeah.
But the thing I think that made the difference with this is nothing like, and you didn't do breaking news unless it was legitimately breaking news in the middle of one of these broadcasts. You wouldn't do that. This is a rule that didn't exist.
We didn't have the FCC or anything like that. People were still, there were guidelines. You didn't say naughty words. You didn't do sexual situations. You didn't do gratuitous violence or anything.
Erika would not have survived during this time period on the radio.
No, you'd have been so bored to tears.
Yes.
But the Shadow dispensed justice with his pistols, and there was violence, and Westerns were huge. That was the big thing back then. Westerns and gangsters. But
it wasn't this level. It just wasn't. And so they came on, and people legitimately thought something had happened, and martial law had been declared. Right. And there was a state of emergency.
Yep.
It was done very realistic, and it was intentional, because when you get to the end and he comes back on and he says, by the way, this was
there's a reason why he did that. We'll get to that in a minute. But then suddenly the military are in control of the radio. And we're getting, and they're actually patching in radio communications from artillery and all this stuff. It's his way of bringing in the artilleryman character and some of the military chapters from the books. And it's an amazing way to do it. Oh my gosh, you're sucked in. And what was cool was some of the code words and stuff that they were using, where some of his writing staff were ex-military. So they knew how to make it sound very realistic. And all they did was transpose a few numbers. And then you get like the ham radio character, 2X2L calling CQ, 2X2L calling CQ, come in, please. And they're the only guys still on the air, at one point, and it's terrifying. And then it cuts back to the guy at Radio 1, and the fog is closing, the tripods are marching. It's insanity. And it gets to that point again where he's talking about the black smoke that they're releasing. And there's bits where people have died already, and you hear the smoke, and they
and the gun, the heat guns,
the planes come in and try to take it out, and you hear about the pilot deciding to dive on one, kamikaze one, and they take one out, and that was the equivalent of the Thunder Child from the book, taking out one out of all of them. All we ever got was one. In the book, we only get one. In this, we only get one. It's crazy. And so we're at this point, one has died, one of the tripods. But then New York has fallen. And we literally hear them destroying New York. And they're doing, the fog is coming in and it's killing all the people. And our reporter on the edge is talking, and he's talking, it's coming across Fifth, it's coming across Broadway, and then he starts coughing, and then you hear the mic drop. Literal mic drop moment. And again,
nothing that they would ever do on a radio.
Not silence, but you hear the warning bell, the foghorns, all this, but nothing else for another 10 seconds. Insanity. Nobody would have done that, And at about this time, according to Wells, this is when they first started getting memos from some of the calls that they were getting and some of the things that you've gone a little too far, guys. Something you got to stop. You got to stop. He's saying that's when they got it. Everybody else says they got it like 10 minutes or 20 minutes before.
I was gonna
But
say they
didn't
brought
care.
No, but
yeah.
yeah, they did.
Yeah, and then that's the break.
That's
you
the
know,
intermission.
that's the intermission.
40-minute mark.
Yes.
I paid attention. Mark.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder if at that time the studio came down and was like, cut it for a minute. And they're like, you need to
Yes, yeah.
deep
You've
pan
been
it.
listening to H.G. Wells, Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater presenting H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Yeah, we will return shortly. And and it's like, holy crap, this, and then there's this perfect storm that was going on behind the scenes nobody knew about. We'll talk about that after the break. But man, that moment in history right there.
So it goes, they come back from break. We'll talk about what was going on behind the scenes, but they come back from break.
And now it sounds more like a novel.
It's a dramatization. It feels like what a normal Mercury Theater production or any theater production would have been at this point.
And it's barely 10 minutes long.
Yeah. He goes through and he's describing, he meets the artilleryman who's, trying to dig a hole and live in the sewers, and he's already planning the revolution and all this. It's a great bit in the book, and it's a great bit in this. But again, it's lost that sense of immediacy. It's lost that sense of urgency, but it's still good. And then because Orson Welles, man, he's at his height at this point. He's still a kid doing this. This is pre-Citizen Kane. This is pre-everything. And man, the next, then it wraps up. It wraps up neatly. It wraps up like the book.
He's like, if that bell at your door is not the Martian.
Yeah, he makes a speech.
It's a Halloween. Yeah,
he makes the speech.
He acknowledges that the intent was to be mistaken as a real radio broadcast.
For Halloween, this was our way of dressing up in a sheet and going boo, and we totally destroyed New York and our headquarters, and our radio station headquarters.
But be rest assured, both are still intact,
and we'll be open for business tomorrow. And he's also talks about and if you see that face, looking in your window and all that, don't remember it's not a Martian, it's just Halloween. Yeah, and it's a great speech.
Yeah,
and they go off the air.
Yep.
And with that, we're gonna go off the air to a break, and we will be right back.
Eerie, Appalachia. Gear up for a frightful jaunt into the darkest reaches of the ancient Appalachians. Folks deep within the Appalachian hollers lean close to the campfire to share stories of the inexplicable with hushed awe. Monsters rumbling in the hills, strange lights darting through the pitch black night sky, horrible occurrences almost ineffable in their bizarre tragedy. Tall tales, you might say. Tell that to the Flatwoods monster in Braxton County, West Virginia, or the Goat Man of Louisville. Look into his humanoid eyes and let him know you don't believe. And what of those apparitions in Mammoth Cave's Corpse Rock, or the Satan spawn known as the Jersey Devil? How do you respond when confronted by these mysteries? From the metaphysical energy that swirls near Serpent Mound in Ohio to Point Pleasant's Mothman legacy, Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz explore the dark history lurking in the shadows of Appalachia. Read by Mark Muncy, author and experts on strange folklore with appearances on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Robert the Doll, and many, many more.
Destiny Beard, the lyrical soprano who will haunt your dreams. With her alluring melodies and intricate harmonies, this dark siren of wistful song shall capture your soul and lead you into the night. Check out Destiny's new single, The Haunting Is Over, with international musicians Sam Haines and Gary Bennett, as well as her other musical works at destinybeard.com.
Okay, we're back, and
No moment of silence there.
No black clouds of
because we don't want you changing the channel. But Carrie asked, who's in the background here with all of us as per usual, asked a very interesting question: was How the hell did they pull off destroying New York on the radio?
Yeah, it was those sound effects
Foley,
were
man.
Foley work, which was
So what's Foley work?
All right,
So
that's
for
something
listeners
that-
that might not know what the hell a Foley work
have
is,
you ever seen behind the scenes footage of the sound guy breaking the celery to make the sound of the leg breaking?
the leg breaking, or
and thing-
you stepping on
coconuts against the thing to make
yeah.
the horse clopping. That all originated from radio dramatization.
and some of that was even stagecraft for vaudeville back in the day. You would do these sound effects to make the horse sounds when the cardboard horse would come across the stage,
Mhm.
and you do all these things live because that's what you had to do. There weren't digital sound banks. There weren't things like that. Now they did have some recordings, but they would find new ways of, like the foghorns was literally a guy with a foghorn, like that. And some of them were noises they made. The cannon sound when they're doing the artillery sound, you're fire one. You hear this.
It's like
that
a
was-
metal tub.
That was a tub of water
yeah.
pushing a plunger through. It's
Yeah.
amazing these sound effects that they come up with, and it's and some of them are still used today. And that was a big thing with the radio dramas. The gunshots were guns firing blanks. And the the bullwhips were usually bullwhips. So some of these things were what they were, but a lot of things they were making sounds from what you had available.
Yeah.
so
So-
and they
did
practice it.
practice, but it was like a South Park, right? They
Yeah,
had a
it's 6
week
days to air. Yeah, it's
air
basically
and
they'd
just
come
get
up with the
ready.
concept, they'd write the script, they'd have about 3 or 4 days to get the script right. They had a repertory company, so everybody knew what characters they could play and what range they had. They'd be like, oh, we need a general here. Oh, I can do that. And I'm also playing the lieutenant in this scene, and then I'm playing the news guy in this scene. And then we're gonna kill him off, so then I can be this guy and stuff like that. So they all had a group of parts that they did, and they were jumping around like crazy. This is old time radio at its best. And yeah, that's what they did. But then there was all this weird stuff happened right before the show, even while they were working on it, right?
Okay.
So the guy who's the lead writer, right? He's
Okay.
writing his version of War of the Worlds, and he's the guy who comes up with the idea. He and Orson sit and go, let's make it modern. Let's do it here instead of just doing a Victorian presentation. So he is like, well, where are they going to land? We need to have them destroy New York. He literally threw a dart at a map and it lands at Grover's Mills, New Jersey, and
Perfect.
puts that town on the map literally. And then he starts figuring, all right, well, let's use because like I said, some of these guys were military. They start figuring, well, how would they march in? How would they do this? And they'd come in from 3 ways. So that's when they announced the 2nd cylinder and the 3rd cylinder. And then they realized Princeton's right there. So let's make our professor from Princeton.
Right.
And then so they literally are doing all this, and they start figuring out, well, this is how they would tear up the railroad lines. They would tear up communication lines.
Yeah.
They would shut down telegraph lines.
They even one of the details that I thought was nice was they even made a moment where the reporters like, oh, the officer is arguing with officer won the argument.
yeah,
Everyone's having to back up now, and just like it was very true. Like it almost sounded like they had taken recent reports and kind of inspired that script.
Oh yeah.
for
They
sure.
were one of the guys, I guess, listened to the Hindenburg disaster
Oh god.
over and over, so he
That's-
could get that for the voice,
For the tone.
for
for
the
the
tone.
tone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Which
that-
was a real disaster.
Yes.
That wasn't a stage dramatization.
no, but that's what he
unfortunately.
used as character research
Yeah.
to be the reporter for the. Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, unbelievable sight. And that if you listen to that and then listen to the Hindenburg report, the humanity, it's the same voice, and that's how he did it so well and stuff like that.
So let's transport ourselves into the studios. So they do this and phone calls start coming in.
Yes.
Lots of phone
Phone
calls
And
start
again,
coming
the
in.
switchboard ladies had just had that training. So they're at first trying to dismiss it and being nice. And then they realize, holy crap, what's going on? And the switchboard gets flooded. Now, the reason we know about the switchboard getting flooded and the reason we know all this stuff is because it becomes news, right?
Yeah.
This night, it becomes the night that America trembled, which becomes a movie in the 1950s, dramatizing this night. And then it's redone again in the 1970s called The Night That Panicked America. And again, it's another dramatization of a dramatization
of a
of a dramatization of a novel. you
This
know,
is
so-
like many fourth walls.
Yeah,
We're like
exactly.
fourth and sixth wall. We're in
and so
both
that's why
walls.
it's difficult to try to find out what really happened versus what may have happened, because this may have been Hollywooded a little bit. And what's fun is if you go back to the day after, when all this airs, and Orson Welles is forced to come on the air and make an apology.
Well,
and he's-
did more happen in the studio though?
More did, but there's this bit when he's out making his apology for the film crews, because this is going to be on the Hollywood newsreels and stuff.
Yeah.
You see him come out and he says, ladies and gentlemen, it was just, we had no idea the reaction. We had no idea this. And as he's walking away, you see him smiling.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what his response was going to do too. And then Life magazine comes out and starts interviewing everybody in New Jersey that said that they were scared of this. Well, guess what happens? Everyone in New Jersey says, oh yeah, I was scared. And so they actually have a photo of a guy with a gun saying he was out hunting Martians. It was totally staged.
No,
Yeah.
this is where the urban legend aspect
suddenly starts growing.
One is about a woman who says, I'd rather go out this way than be taken by Martians. And people thought people died that night.
Yes.
And that this woman had taken poison. None of that's true. But there was deaths involved with this dramatization, but it wasn't during the original airing.
No.
And Ecuador in 1949, they aired it down there, and people rioted and killed 10 people in front of the radio station
because it was poorly translated, and they were still broadcasting the original American version on top of it. So that's when it explodes again. And that's why most places were afraid to run this for years. People were afraid to rerun it because it caused such a disaster.
So newspaper articles were all over this. Magazines became all over this. It hit the Hollywood newsreel.
Yep.
So if you want to talk about making the correct impact to bring your station to the forefront, your show to the forefront, it did that in spades.
Yeah, and that's when the news crews suddenly realized, wow, all the channels, all the radio channels realized the power of media.
Yeah.
And controlling the narrative and controlling propaganda. And this leads right into World War II.
And a lot of these guys during World War I ended up being hired to do exactly what they did for stuff like this, right? Because it inspired it. Because I even one of my favorite facts about
I just want to point out what gigantic nerds the both of you are.
Well, we're history buffs.
So Valerie was up here visiting. Of course, she doesn't just invade. Well, she invades, but she came up, and as she was on her way up, she's like, what are you guys recording? And I'm like, we're going to record this War of the Worlds, but you got to listen to this broadcast. And so in my mind, if somebody said that, like Mark goes, hey, Erika, you need to watch Trick or Treat. I go watch Trick or Treat. That is the extent of Erika's involvement in that particular request. I just want to point that. So instead of, hey, Val, you just need to listen to this broadcast if you're going to come up and you want to be on the show again. Val's like, no, the research facts. And this happened, and this happened, and woo. Like, what the hell? What the hell is going on here?
Listen, one of my World War I facts is Mel Brooks' job was to be over the radio handles, and he would mislead and misinform the Germans. He would put on shows.
World War II.
That he did that. That's right. So this moment inspired some of the most interesting espionage influences in wartime.
Yeah, we'll talk about the magicians of World War II another time. So that was good. But this really did. It's like, okay, this is how a war would happen. This is how a war would be broadcast. And so this suddenly there are standards now. Yeah, suddenly we have to announce whenever there is a dramatization that's going to pretend to be other things. But it doesn't happen ever. Nobody does this again until the 80s. before anybody even tries to do something like
And
this.
we'll talk about the 80s thing again later.
And
But
they were convinced that when the 1950 movie came out, the 1954 movie came out, George Powell, that might cause problems. Even though it was a freaking movie, you had to pay tickets to go see because people were so nervous about this.
well, because the way they
title.
started doing it was they did it, the 1950s movie. What is your favorite War of the Worlds movie, by the way? Which one?
Oh, the 1954, George Powell. Yeah,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
The new ones have moments, but
That's fine. I just want to make sure we're in the right
yeah,
thing. Because
yeah.
if you said the Tom Cruise one, I'd probably hate you with this
Yeah,
microphone.
there are moments that are good, but
That's
no,
okay.
it's-
We can have travelers get mad at me for saying that, but
Yeah,
whatever. But what was interesting even about the 1954, and we think people should watch it. We mentioned War of the Worlds, but I don't think we said the 1954 version. I don't think we were very
Yeah.
specific
No,
on
I think I was on the show, but we'll be double specific. When I mentioned that
That's okay. I'm
my
gonna
top
go listen
movie,
to it
it's the
because I listened.
1954 George Powell War of the Worlds.
I listened to it today.
Yeah.
Didn't say that. He said George Powell, but nothing else. But what's interesting is the way the movie is actually initially done is it starts off almost like a documentary.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
little bit.
which doesn't
And it
help.
does that intro.
Yeah, it does
Does
the
that
intro. It doesn't help the whole like
No.
this isn't really happening because again, there wasn't like, hey, we need to look up fake news. This was it appeared to be news.
Yeah.
So
This
the
is like
movie
the
comes out, scares the
mermaid
shit
thing.
out of everybody
Yeah.
because again, we are also at one of the heights of UFO-ness.
And again, some of the characterizations, the monster in that is probably at one of the earliest terrifying things on film. You know, it's because it is the first alien we'd seen. Everything else was always something like, you know, robot monster where it's in a gorilla suit with a space helmet because they couldn't afford a full gorilla suit. You know, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And so that comes out scary as crap. Then they do it again in 1960, 70. When did the second one come out? The second movie, War of the Worlds.
They didn't do another one until the
Tom Cruise
the
one,
Tom
right?
Cruise one.
Yeah,
that
okay.
was
Yeah.
90s or 2000s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was Spielberg. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. And
I think the problem
It's-
is that premise was not going to have because Independence Day came out before that movie,
which
and
was an
which-
incredible version of War of the Worlds.
yeah, it really was kind of a War of the Worlds,
They even
right?
kill him with a virus. No
Yeah.
spoilers, but you know.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that is that I think a lot of times when you take something that was shocking, like we talked about Jaws a little bit. We gave an homage to Jaws on the last when we were talking about the movies, right? Honorable mention. But then what they've done now is other shark movies, but like Meg. So now it's not just a shark at a beach.
Yeah,
It's a megalodon
yeah.
that's been now breeding and like all the like we're an underwater
There
lab.
have been other versions of War of the Worlds since. There are BBC did one as a mini series. Of course, we got to go back to the old kids book, the Tripod series, which take place in a world after War of the Worlds. They did a War of the Worlds TV show in the 80s where it was after the George Powell movie, which was technically a sequel to the original invasion of the radio broadcast. And the radio broadcast gets brought up in tons of pop culture because it was so iconic. And they even brought up in one of my favorite movies, Buckaroo Banzai. There's a whole plot twist that where the aliens are nesting is in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And they're all filed for Social Security the day after the Orson Welles broadcast. And that's how Jeff Goldblum's character figures out, the 30 days, how September able to October 31st. Oh, it's Halloween. Wait, 1938. That's Orson Welles. War of the Worlds. It's the day after. It's just this great bit. But that's the kind of thing that happens is, it built such an iconic moment in history. And it is, to me, the best Halloween you can have is War of the Worlds. And
I can see that. But I think also when they try to remake it, the standards are so much higher with what we need to shock us. Back then it was a radio broadcast with breaking news saying an object has landed.
Oh yeah.
Like somebody says an object has landed. We need a little more like that whole Vegas object is landed. We're like, show us the ring cameras with the aliens on them.
And this is, I mean, honestly, there are, there was one of my other fun things to listen to is Jeff Wayne from the Moody Blues did a musical version called Jeff Wayne's musical version of War of the Worlds.
That's a really long title.
It is an amazing rock opera. It was one of the first things to combine rock and classical, and it's this incredible 2 double album set, and I love it. It's great for long road trips. And
your wife has banned it.
My wife is banned because, well, the girl in it is Carrie, and he gave a love interest to the main character, and they
gave your wife to the main character.
No, they gave the main character has a name. So, but I recently did an Audible version of that as a book, and it stars Michael Sheehan from Good Omens and a bunch of other characters. They did an Audible version of the musical version of War of the Worlds, based somewhere between the novel and the original. And
this is so many walls.
It's
still
so many levels. It's and then all of that, and then my favorite little fun thing, we were talking about it on the way here, was a movie called Spaced Invaders.
Yes.
Anybody remember that?
Yes.
Where these aliens are parked near Mars of a powerful armada, and these are the guys, they're sent to Mars because they're terrible, and nobody cares about these guys. They're the lowest of the low. And they hear the radio broadcast of War of the Worlds from a local radio station that's rebroadcasting it for Halloween. So they decide, they hear that Earth is being invaded and they want to be part of it. So they leave Mars and come to Earth and get.
And it's Halloween.
It's a Halloween. It's a kid's movie, but it is adorable. And
so I have a story about Space Invaders.
Oh, really?
I know you didn't know that. So, and he didn't, folks. So I used to live at the movie theaters. Like I would go see 2, 3, 4 movies a weekend, like just go kind of back to back, mostly paid for the tickets, hashtag expiration on crimes. But I went into Space Invaders, right? Because we went and we were sitting there. It was me and a friend that we used to go to the movies all the time. And I want to say it was opening night. There were maybe 25 people in the theater.
It was not a big hit.
No, it wasn't. Not only that, this thing starts. Have you ever gotten into sort of like a giggle fit or a laughing fit when things? So this, I'm not going to give it away because I actually think travelers, you should watch it.
It is genuinely hysterical.
It is hysterical, and you have to put your campy glasses, hat,
I know.
jersey on.
Pretend you're 10 years old watching.
Yes. Yeah. So I start watching it and I forget what happens in the beginning, but I just we're laughing at all of it's so bad, but people are getting up and walking out of the theater, not because we're laughing. They are talking about how terrible this movie is, and they're getting up and leaving. And we were just rolling because it was the 80s. It was cheese.
It's so good.
One of the Space Invaders is like a mini Jack Nicholson.
He's an impersonation of Jack Nicholson. He's the pilot.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Yes. And the captain is like a German captain, and he's leading them on the mission, and he leads them out, and there's a road, and he steps out onto the road because they're trying to figure out what this thing is. This Black River is, and he steps out on it, and as soon as he steps out on it, smashed by a semi like 2 seconds later, and they're like, oh, yeah, they're it's a weapon, and then later on, as the movie progresses, they're like, poor Captain Bipto. But I just remember that line, poor Captain Bipto. But then there's a bit later where they're going out trick-or-treating, and they're infiltrating with the other trick-or-treaters to try to figure out what's going on in the world. And the mom leans back to them, and she goes, now remember, kids, watch both ways before you cross the street. And they go, oh, if only Captain Bipto had known. That's the secret.
Yeah, it is. It's so, because also the way they did this alien thing, these things, you're expecting these ginormous creatures to come out of the spaceship, but they're like 2.5 feet tall.
It's a classic. I mean, it's definitely, in the vein of Time Bandits and Goonies and all that stuff. It's along those lines.
Yeah.
It's just an unsung classic. But yeah, so if you want the comedy stylings, get Space Invaders. I would say that's a nice old palate cleanser after watching the hearing the original.
And I feel that a lot of the more recent horror podcasts do take notes from this.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't have Blair Witch.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have Paranormal Activity. We wouldn't have all the POV stuff. This
Yeah.
is what started all that.
Alice Isn't Dead is a
Yeah.
great example where
Yeah.
you feel like you're listening in on a trucker's
Yeah.
conversation. Like she's just got to let
Yep.
it off her
The
chest.
Magnus Project, some of these other
Yeah.
ones, they all took notes from this. And
SCP
So,
stuff.
Um,
Backrooms.
now for travelers, so we have to ask this.
Oh.
Does our little town in New Jersey
Oh,
celebrate this? So let's talk about that. So travelers,
Travelers Mill has they have tripods set up around the town, kind of like the Flatwoods monster chairs in Braxton. So you can actually go to different tripods that are set up by different artists representing their takes on the invasion. There is a museum in town that you can go to that is the War of the Worlds Museum. There are a few other kind of little sites. There's a restaurant that has, a War of the Worlds burger, and there is a pizza that's called the Death Ray that I highly recommend. And then it's a lot of fun. You can also go to the Orson Welles tribute place in New York, where he has at the Radio
City Music Hall, right?
I don't think it's a music hall, but they have a Radio Hall of Fame museum, and that's one of the whole exhibits is War of the Worlds stuff, and it includes a couple of the machines for making the sounds from that night from the Foley work. So it's pretty cool, and it's got pictures of Orson Welles and all that. But the best thing to do, travelers, is tune in, find it somewhere online, turn out the lights, and just listen for a little bit to 1 hour of magic.
And then you can follow it up with the 1954.
George Powell classic, War of the Worlds.
And then your palate cleanser is Space Invaders.
And then listen to Jeff Wayne's musical version of War of the Worlds as you're going to bed.
Wow. So we have given an entire days of entertainment to our travelers.
I think I know how I'm spending my October 31st now. So
I'm not doing that.
And then if you really want, go back and read the damn book. It's great.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we will put links to a lot of the stuff we mentioned in the show notes. We need to thank the incomparable and annoying Valerie Willis for showing up.
You love me.
Oh
yeah, that's not up for debate. Many other things are, but that's not up for debate. So thank you, Mark, for taking us on a journey.
Hey, it was fun. This was a self-indulgent episode, gang. Thanks for sticking with us, travelers. But there was a place to go visit Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And then, and gang, while you're there, just make sure you visit Yo-Yo Dyne Propulsion Systems. And
Happy Friday the 13th.
happy Friday the 13th, gang. And keep watching the skies. Because remember, intelligences far greater than man's are watching us even now. See you on the other side.